Um, Welcome everybody. It's nice to see you all again. Hope you've all had a good Easter and managed to see a few of your family. And hopefully we can all get out for a pint with a few other friends this next coming week. As Mark just said, we've got a great speaker again tonight. We've just been chatting with Chris for a while beforehand. I can tell he's going to be a very entertaining speaker. Another good night coming up for you. And I'll just hand over now to Don, who is our comms officer, who will advertise the next events for us. Are you there, Don?
Yep, thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks, Don.
Okay, hopefully you've all got my email. Apologies it went out in the early hours of this morning instead of yesterday, but welcome to this evening's entertainment. Next Thursday on the 15th of April is going to be time for the snooker fans out there. And to coincide with the Snooker World Championship, we have an evening in conversation with two stars from the world of snooker, John Parrott and Dennis Taylor. This promises to be an evening of pure enjoyment. And as our guest speaker tonight was just saying, two comedians who play snooker or two snooker players who tell funny anecdotes, we're not sure which. The following week, on Thursday, 22nd of April, just before our AGM, we invite you to join with Kevin Connolly, an outstanding comedian and impersonator and a star of TV and radio who will be entertaining you in your homes. Following this, on Thursday, the 29th of April, we're going to be the guests of the INLI at a lifeboat station on the Norfolk coast. And that leads us through to Thursday, the 6th of May, which is the run-up to VE Day. We're planning a very special event with Fleet 41 Club and a Royal Navy veteran of World War II, Norman Bartlett. That will be an excellent occasion. Now, on to tonight's guest speaker, Chris Brindley MBE. Chris is one of the UK's most foremost business leaders and has been a member of the Rugby League World Cup 2021 board since 2018. His diverse career has seen him occupy senior roles within the likes of NatWest, British Gas and Metrobank, as well as a number of non-executive roles across the sports industry. His accolades include Britain's Best Boss, Sales and Marketing Director of the Year for 3 consecutive years, Sales Leader of the Year at the National Sales Awards, and in 2017 he was awarded UK Non-Executive Director of the Year by the Institute of Directors. In June 2018, Chris was awarded an MBE for his services to sport. In June 2019, he was appointed chairman of the Rugby League World Cup 2021. And he's about to tell you what happened next. Chris, over to you, sir.
Thanks very much. And already I see in the chat we've got some people starting the debate about proper rugby. So great that we've got 41 Zoom 3 talking about Northern Rugby, and then we've got Mike going, what is Rugby League? I definitely am not here to enter that debate tonight, although perhaps during the questions and answers a little bit later on, we could ask if the Rugby Union got rid of contested scrums and rucks and mauls, would it just be Rugby League with line-outs? So that's an interesting thing that perhaps the pandemic has brought about some changes in sport. But just to let you know, I'm a fan of both codes. I'm the only person in Rugby League history that missed a Rugby League AGM because I was in New Zealand with my son watching the British Lions draw the test in 2017. As you can imagine, that didn't go particularly down well with the Rugby League Council. So maybe one for the questions and answers later. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your kind invitation this evening. Absolutely delighted to be able to present to such a prestigious organisation like the 41 Club. As some of you have already gathered, I have a face for radio. And because I have a face for radio, I do have a few slides that I will share with you, perhaps just to outline the journey of how to organise a World Cup. And that'll be the first half of the presentation. I'll then take any questions. Then the second half, I'll tell you how the best laid plans of organising the World Cup got tipped completely upside down in March of 2020 when the pandemic swept through this country. And as we all know, have been locked down several times, depending upon where you live. And like Dom said earlier, I am looking for a pint on the 12th of April. My table is booked for 2 o'clock outside. So I'll be toasting you all on that day. So already some great rugby union quotes coming in about pockets of the Premiership. I can't wait for the question and answer. It's just going to be an immense amount of fun. So I've got a few slides, as I say. Please put any questions you've got in the chat box. I'll try and cover them as I go along, but we'll definitely cover them in the Q&A. So I'll just bring up my slides, if I can, please. There we go. So I'll look for Jim Conway. If you can give me the thumbs up. Can you see the slides, Jim? Great stuff. So thanks, everybody. Let me just talk about the branding, because you'll see that I've got the branding behind me. I've got the T-shirt with the branding on, and you'll see that the branding is heavily part of the slide. We are doing something different here that has never been done in global sporting history. We are running 3 and now 4, and I'll tell you why 4, but the ribbons were created when the original World Cup plan was to run a men's, women's and rugby league wheelchair concurrently. Whether you look at soccer or you look at rugby union, typically, or even cricket, the men's World Cup and the women's World Cup are held separately. This is the first time it's ever been tried to run 3 World Cups at the same time during the same 6-week period. And you'll see why we chose that in a moment. So each of the ribbons, they're different colours because they represent a different World Cup, all under the same guise of Rugby League World Cup 2021. So briefly, what we were trying to achieve was an event format of 32 teams. There'll be 16 teams in the men's event, and they will be coming from the traditional nations of Australia, New Zealand, England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. But also in the men's for the first time, Jamaica have qualified to play, as have Greece. And what's really interesting about Greece qualifying for the World Cup is Greece are banned from playing rugby league in Greece because it's outlawed sport by the government, because the Greek Rugby League refused to be part of the Greek pentathlon team going forward. So as you can imagine, in some countries, there are some strange goings on, and Greece is certainly one of them. So we've got Greece playing, even though they had to play every game outside of their home country. And other teams that are of cultural interest as the games get underway in the men's will be Papua New Guinea, Cook Islands, Fiji, Samoa, who all have their own versions of the haka. So as well as the All Blacks, which we're familiar with, we get to see lots of different countries perform the haka as part of the Men's World Cup. The women's will again see some very traditional teams like England, Australia, New Zealand. But the first time in Rugby League history, we have a South American team entering the World Cup, and that is the ladies from Brazil. So that is just going to be just an amazing carnival atmosphere when we see the Brazilians play. Interestingly, Canada also qualified in the women's tournament. And I'll tell you a little bit story later when we made the draw about some of the things that we had to consider about the fact that we had England and Canada in the draw for the Rugby League World Cup women's competition. In the men's, we have again traditional New Zealand, England, Australia. The current world champions are France, and they will take part. But interestingly, for the first time as well in the Rugby League wheelchair format, we have a team from Norway. So it's the first ever Nordic team to compete in any Rugby League format. So we wanted it to be a very different tournament. And I think we can safely say we've really pushed the boundaries out in terms of the competing nations in the men, the women's and the wheelchair. Just one word on the wheelchair. A lot of people call it our disability sport. And actually, that's not right. Rugby League wheelchair is different from any other disability sport in that if you are able-bodied, you are allowed to play in the wheelchair tournaments. It is wheelchair-based, so if you're able-bodied and can manoeuvre a wheelchair, you can play for England. And the reason we started that as a sport is because we wanted people with disability to play alongside people who don't have disability. But if I tell you a very quick story about Jack and Harry Brown, both of them play for England Rugby League Wheelchair. Jack is able-bodied. His brother Harry isn't. His brother Harry lost his legs through meningitis at a very early age. And his brother wanted to go and find a sport which would allow him to play alongside his brother. Now, traditional disability sports exclude people who haven't got a disability, and able-bodied sports often disqualify people with disabilities because of the integrity of the competition and the able to compete on equal terms. So Rugby League Wheelchair is a mixed sex and ability sport and disability sport. And in the England Rugby League Wheelchair team, we have Jack and Harry, as I mentioned, and we also have Jodie Boyd-Ward, who is a female participant. So we are truly an inclusive sport. And just a few other bits before I move on. We're the first ever tournament to pay equal prize money for men, women and wheelchair. We're also the first ever global tournament to pay participation fees equally to men, women and wheelchair. And just to explain that in a bit more detail, if you've been an England female that wanted to take part in the 2017 World Cup in Australia, representing England as a rugby league player, you would have had to pay your own airfare, your own hotel accommodation, and all your living expenses whilst over there. And most of our female competitors have day jobs as well. So you would have had to have lost out on your pay. So we decided, because one of our values, as you'll see later, is to be truly inclusive, we decided to make sure that everybody is equal. And again, we're really proud that we're the first tournament to do that. And as you can see there, we've got 21 nations playing 61 games, 21 venues, 18 host towns and cities. And the reason the BBC Sport logo is on there is for the first time ever, the BBC have agreed to show all 61 games live, and pre-pandemic, 16 of those were going to be shown on either BBC One or BBC Two. That would be a record number of World Cup games shown in this country for the sport of rugby league. But the fact that all 61 will either be on the internet or the red button means that from a global reach and a national reach, this will be a really breakthrough tournament for the sport of rugby league. So whilst the games might be largely in the north, as I'll explain why and where in a moment, the fact is we do have national reach through our national broadcaster. So you can see people cheering. That was us when we realised we'd got the award of the World Cup for 2021 pre-pandemic, and we knew we had a task ahead, but boy, were we up for it. So I'll just give you a little bit of background in maybe how a tournament is awarded and how a tournament actually comes to kick off on a particular day in a particular year. So basically the history of the tournament goes right back to 2013. That was the last time the World Cup was held in England. It was the 14th men final. And just to put this in context, the Rugby League World Cup is the second oldest men's World Cup in history. If you think about the first World Cup, it would be the Football World Cup in 1930. We were the second one, and we were ahead of Rugby Union. The reality is now the Rugby Union World Cup financially is light years ahead of the Rugby League World Cup because, again, of the tremendous power of broadcasting and commercial partnerships. But England failed to reach the World Cup final in 2013. It was an Australia-New Zealand final. But actually, we set a world record crowd by playing in front of 76,000 people at Manchester United's football ground. We realised then that we'd like the World Cup back. In 2017, it had already been decided that the tournament would be played in Australia. But we decided then as a Rugby League board, we were going to bid for the Rugby League World Cup again. And you can see there some of the process that you have to go through to be allowed to stage a World Cup as a national governing body. The reason in 2015 we approached government was because George Osborne at the time was the Chancellor, and he created something called the Northern Powerhouse. And what we decided to do was pitch to George Osborne that one way of displaying to the world the cool North and all of the benefits, whether that's tourism, whether that's investment through industry. One of the things you could do was hold a tournament in the North. And with Rugby League being founded 126 years ago in the north of England at the George Hotel in Huddersfield, we decided to really play on that. And as a result of that, we entered our bid to the International Rugby League. That's our international federation. And the reason you have to bid to an international federation is because they hold the rights fee. So basically, whoever is going to run the tournament pays the International Federation several £million. And that money basically keeps the International Federation alive for the next 4 years. And they top it up with a few international tournaments. So as a result of that, we got given £25 million of funding. I'll break that down. That was 10 million to organise and start to run the tournament. 15 million was our legacy fund. And that was broken down into 10 million of a small grants known as Created By, and then a 10 million fund for capital grants for big clubhouses, for refurbishment, for new clubs to be established. And that was our inspirational legacy campaign. And we wanted the legacy to be complete before the tournament started. Again, those of you who are involved in sport know that typically people leave the legacy until after the tournament. We decided that was a bit too late because history shows legacy rarely follows a tournament. I don't believe there's been a legacy since London 2012. We've not seen more athletes running around tracks or more people swimming. In fact, we've seen less. So we believe that the legacy should be built beforehand. We submitted a bid, and it was a competitive bid with North America, and we bid high, and we bid higher than we would normally have liked, but we were in competition, and we're delighted to say that we won the bid in 2016, and therefore in 2017 we established a wholly owned subsidiary of the RFL. So typically the national governing body owns the running of the World Cup, and as a result of that, the Rugby Football League or the national governing body has to underwrite any potential losses, because that 10 million is not enough to run a tournament, pay all the fixed costs, hire the grounds, and to make a profit. Typically, our budget would be in the region of around £30 million plus pre-pandemic. And then very briefly, we started to then launch a host process. The 2013 World Cup, whilst it had 2 games at big venues, typically all the other games were at traditional rugby league heartlands. We wanted to play our games in some big cities. So we did a bid process for the first time ever. Normally, it's rugby league that does the begging. Because we had attracted that world record crowd, the big venues like Newcastle St James's Park, like the Emirates Stadium in Arsenal, like the Ricoh Stadium in Coventry, like Old Trafford Manchester, and like Anfield Liverpool, for the first time ever, they approached us asking us to host our big games at their stadiums. I think that was directly as a result of the success we'd seen in 2013. And therefore we had a bid process, and we announced those hosts in 2019, and we've still maintained our integrity of some of the traditional rugby league grounds like Warrington, like St Helens, like the Emerald Stadium, Leeds Headingley. So we've maintained our integrity, but also we've used this as an opportunity to get more people into grounds. And then, as some of you may have seen, in January 2020, we had an official draw at Buckingham Palace. That was very interesting. Why was it interesting? Because it was the first official royal engagement that our patron, Prince Harry, undertook following his Christmas in Canada, should we call it. So we had the most amazing television coverage. And I mentioned earlier, we had to think this one through really carefully. In the women's draw, we had England and Canada. Harry and Meghan had just spent a long time in Canada. And we had to make sure that we didn't have Harry drawing out the balls for the women's game. Because what if Harry had drawn out England v Canada? Had that happened, we'd have just written the headline for every single tabloid that Harry has to choose England v Canada. And he would have had to do that in his personal life. So to sidestep that, Harry did the men's draw, which Canada were not present, and we had Jason Robinson do the women's draw. And yes, England did get drawn against Canada. So when you think organising a global tournament is all about getting people to buy tickets, let me tell you, there's more nonsense goes on behind the scenes that's not related to actually kicking or catching or running with the ball. So there's just one example of some of the thinking that has to go in behind a tournament. Those are some of our host cities and venues, and a couple of just brief explanations. Why Coventry? Coventry is the European City of Culture this year. And we were delighted that Coventry chose to have a rugby league game between the world champions Australia versus Scotland at the Ricoh Arena as part of their Year of Culture. We actually are going to play at the Emirates, our first semi-final. That's really interesting again, with a little bit of background. We will be the first ever non-football game to be played at the Emirates Stadium, home of Arsenal. Although lots of Arsenal fans have told me there's been lots of games at the Emirates where no football has been played for many years. So that's an interesting stat. Why did Arsenal never have a game of any other sport at the Emirates? Arsene Wenger didn't want the pitch ruined. And again, sometimes where you wonder why and how decisions are made, Arsene Wenger didn't want the ground ruined. As soon as he left, the groundsman from Arsenal went to Old Trafford, Manchester, where we host the Grand Final and the World Cup Final. And quite frankly, it doesn't damage the pitch. The modern day pitch is not pure grass. It's a mix of artificial and real grass, and actually doesn't wear and tear. So rugby games are not going to mess up the pitch. That's great news for us being at Arsenal, because it's one of the biggest grounds in and around the London area. It's great for us, it's great for Arsenal, it puts them on the showcase, and it's between the West Coast line for Euston and the East Coast line for King's Cross. So there's some of the places. And it is the cool north, because that was the basis on which government funding was granted. So 83% of the games will be played in the north of England, with the games outside of the north being Coventry, Arsenal, and we'll play some Rugby League wheelchair games at the Copper Box, where the Olympics took place in Stratford. And you can see there, we'd set out our strategic goals. We just wanted the biggest and best Rugby League World Cup. We wanted special moments, but we wanted our strategic goals to involve more people attending than ever. So we're looking to have 750,000 people watch versus the 2013 World Cup that had 438,000. We wanted to make a profit to reinvest in the game. We wanted a long-lasting legacy. We wanted Rugby League to have profile and visibility, and we want to be the most digitally connected. And you can see our 4 values there, which are bold and brave, to be world-class, to be authentic, and to be inclusive. And it was that value that led us to make sure that equal payments and equal prize money were allocated to the women in the wheelchair as well as the men. And actually, we wanted to be more than a tournament. We wanted people who've never been to a rugby league game to come and visit us. We wanted eventers. We wanted millennials, people who perhaps live in London that would never dream of going to London Broncos, actually to want to come to Newcastle for the opening ceremony and the opening game against Samoa, or come to Liverpool and have a weekend in Liverpool and enjoy, hopefully, England in the quarter-final with a double header for an England women's group game. And you can see there, we're talking about social impacts. We wanted to be a tournament of firsts. First tournament ever for Rugby League to have a ballot for tickets. The first tournament ever to have a mental wellbeing charter. The first tournament ever to partner with Movember, and also to have a sustainability charter regarding our carbon footprint. So you can see that we want to be more than just a game of rugby league that happens every other day for 6 weeks running. So I'll just briefly go through some stakeholders we were dealing with pre-pandemic, then I'll break, I'll take any questions, and then I will go through the whole turning upside down of what happened from March 2020. So typically, if you're organising a World Cup, you'll be in contact on a daily basis with the following stakeholders. So the International Rugby League hold the rights, and they always want to make sure that the tournament's going to be a success, because at the end of the tournament, I have to send the International Rugby League a cheque of several £million, and if they don't get that, they've got some problems. So they're always on our case, and rightly so. Secondly, I always have to deal with the Rugby Football League. They're underwriting the tournament, so they always want to make sure that we're doing a good job. So ideally, they get a share of the profit. They don't get to pay for any deficit. I have to deal with UK Sport. UK Sport, basically an arm's length government department that are responsible for hosting and organising with the local organising committee all of the major sporting events that happen in this country. So whether that was Tour de France, whether that was the Rugby Union World Cup 2013, whether that's the Euros that are taking place this year, the Women's Euros next year, UK Sport ultimately are the government representative. Also local authorities. Local authorities, not only is the game being held in a ground in their location, so health and safety, policing, all of that, we actually wanted local authorities to activate the tournament for us through schools and through their local communities. We have to deal with the ground owners. We have to respect that we're only renting the ground for one game or one weekend. So ultimately, we've got to be respectful of that. And the thing about global tournaments, again, is the commercial rights of the ground are not allowed to be displayed when a global tournament has a commercial partner. So again, simple things like dressing the ground, removing all the existing ground sponsors, all of that has to be discussed, because when we've gone, they've got to put their own sponsors back, whether that's the kit sponsor or their name partner. Obviously, we're talking to the players all the time. We want to make sure that the accommodation we offer them, the training facilities, the transport. So everybody who travels to the UK will travel premium economy. And if the national federations want to upgrade that to business or first class, that'll be at their cost, not our cost. But all of the cost of travel up to premium economy is our responsibility. And again, that seems relatively straightforward pre-pandemic, but I'll tell you some tales in a minute about how difficult that's been post-pandemic. We've got volunteers, and I think we've got a volunteer for the Rugby League World Cup on the call tonight, and thank you. We want 2,021 volunteers to help us get people to the ground safely, to understand where to park and where to eat. So getting the volunteer programme, again, working with Manchester Metropolitan University, we had a really good start for that. We had to create a new board, and we've got some great board members, several of which have never seen a game of rugby league in their life, and I'm delighted, because that means they've been appointed to the board because of the skills that they bring, not the fact that they know the rules of rugby league. I've got a chief executive, John Dutton, who used to work for the rugby league, so he knows the rules, he knows the politics. We've got broadcasters. Not only have we negotiated with the BBC, and just little things for you that are interesting. You try talking to the BBC about trying to get a rugby league game on at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night on BBC One. Absolutely no chance. Strictly Come Dancing wins every single time, believe it or not. Even the World Cup final, we have to negotiate a slightly earlier kickoff time because the schedules cannot be disrupted. So it's just fascinating having those negotiations about which channel and which time. And even trying to get a 5:15 kickoff on BBC Two for one of the games has proved to be a bone of contention. So it's just fascinating discussing with the UK broadcasters, but also the overseas broadcasters. Again, just think about the fact that Australia and New Zealand are two countries that will be playing. they would want us to kick off at a time that suits them versus the time that suits us, because they don't want their subscribers to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in Australia or New Zealand to watch a kick-off at 6, 7 o'clock at night here. So again, we spend an awful lot of time in negotiation, and everybody thinks it's smooth. Some of the conversations we've had, quite frankly, are just brutal. So Sport England oversees our legacy programme, so we have people from that. And as I said earlier, up until recently, our royal patron was Prince Harry. And I'll tell you who our new one is a little bit later on. And then other people, we've got our own workforce that we have to look after. We've got to work with other sports tournaments to make sure there's no clash on dates. So working with the Premier League regarding their kick-off times, because we're an autumn tournament. All of those bits are just the stuff pre-pandemic that we were negotiating day in, day out, as well as the national federations. So I'll give myself a rest and give a chance for people to digest what I've said and ask any questions. But all of this was organising 3 tournaments in one pre-pandemic. So we were pretty busy then. So I'll just stop sharing. So let me just look at some of the questions. What have we got here? Is Harry being retained given the recent shocking interviews? No. The Queen made very clear that any royal patronages ended immediately. So Harry is no longer our patron. We are awaiting confirmation from Her Majesty the Queen who our new patron will be. So Harry will not be coming to the World Cup. Well, not on our ticket anyway. If he wants to dress up and buy a ticket and stand with the rest of the people, then I'm not going to stop him, but that's him. So after Magic Weekend, Anfield wouldn't go back. Look, I wasn't part of the Super League decision making that went to Anfield. The thing about what was interesting, we had a world club tournament at Anfield where New Zealand played Australia in the final. And our experience of that was great. And I think Super League went back to Anfield on that basis. But I've heard similar feedback that Anfield wasn't good for Super League. But we've decided that we're going to have a double header there, which will be an England game. Should be the England quarter final if results go our right way, and an England double header. Wynne, thank you for joining the volunteer squad. I need to get my act together to get the tickets for the semis at Headingley. Yes, you do. You'll be even more alarmed, Wynne, when I show you some of the ticket sales in a moment post-pandemic. Zoom 3, great to see the Totally Wicked Stadium on the list. It's a great stadium, and you know what Eamon's done at Totally Wicked in terms of income generation for St Helens. I think that's shown on the pitch with them being our Super League Grand Final winners last year. Clark Tilling, Chris, I'm curious to know what fees do clubs command if a game is staged at a facility at Anfield. So I can't commercially give you the figure, but most of the stadiums will be paying us for us to go there. We do a deal on the food and beverage, which usually is very advantageous to the host club, particularly if you've got crowds of 40, 50, 60,000 pounds. So Anfield do their sums. They know even paying us a hosting fee, they will still be able to make some money on all other aspects of the game that we allow them to sell and keep the income from. Thank you, Don, for telling people where tickets are on sale. They went on open sale on the 6th of April, but we'd had a ballot and we'd had a sale previously to that. Jim, Barrow is a heartland of rugby league, and your uncle, the legendary Willie Horn, I hope he is proud that we're having the biggest and best World Cup in England this year. I hope it regenerates the game in Cumbria. I was really saddened when Whitehaven and Workington both were relegated into the third tier along with Barrow, because I think Cumbria should be have a Super League team. So I'm really hoping that we regenerate the game. We wanted to play a game in Workington, but sadly the stadium just didn't meet the standards needed for a modern day world tournament. And at the time, the local authority were promising to build a stadium that would be fit for purpose. Sadly, they never went through with that. I'm presuming for financial or political reasons. But it's really sad we're not able, therefore, to host a big game in Cumbria for the World Cup. Because in the last World Cup and in the last 14 tournaments, the crowd at Workington were just great, and you get some really close games at Derwent Park there. Why is Anglesey missing off the map? I do apologise. It is an English tournament. So we are talking to the other home nations about maybe having a joint World Cup in the future. So apologies for missing Anglesey off, but there was a region. Don, thank you. You've got some of the wheelchair tickets already. I think you're in for the most amazing treat. If there's one prediction I'll make about the World Cup, is that it will bring to the fore the brilliance of rugby league wheelchair rugby. It plays the normal rules of rugby. You've got a pass back, move forward. It's spectacular. And if you get a chance to look at it on YouTube, you will want to go and watch one of those games. Great question about the size of the wheelchair pitch. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the dimensions exactly, but if anybody can help me out, that would be great. And Don has gone on to everybody. Kevin Knowles, who's watching on the phone, sent me the photo of him and a friend with the Rugby League World Cup in the 50s. England won the World Cup in France. It's called the Paul Barriere Trophy. And the sad thing is, we haven't won it for 49 years. And I'm challenged with that personally. I'm a football fan. So in football, you can sort of understand a little bit why England haven't won the World Cup since '66. You've got to beat Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay. England need to beat Australia and New Zealand. That's the reality. We've got Samoa coming up, but I'm really hoping that we have a really good run at this World Cup this year, and England do end up winning it for the first time, as I say, in 49 years. John, please ask me again, perhaps, about the Toronto bit. Happy to have a chat about global expansion of the game and the game in France. So, if there are a few carry on in the pockets of the Premiership, they'll be looking to hold a meeting in the George Hotel. Thank you, John Barrett. Look, let's have a chat later about other sports particularly getting private equity money, and actually where does that potentially lead sports. So more than happy to talk about other sports and investments. Wynne has asked how many fans are expected to attend in total. Depends upon government regulations, as I'll cover in a moment, but ultimately we've got capacity to sell broadly 750,000 tickets. John again, Copper Box, wicked experience, thank you. And Mark House, thank you very much for talking about wheelchair rugby. When no, it's not 13 aside, it's 7. You can't get 13 on a dimensions. There's normally an indoor gym type space, but this year Copper Box and English Institute of Sport in Sheffield will have a better facility, so we can have spectators as well as just players. And come on Wales, yes, well done, Wynne. Okay. What I'll do is I'll just carry on with the second half of the presentation, and then we'll happily just go into free format questions. Again, I'll look to Jim Conway. Jim, can you see the slide? Brilliant, thank you. So you've seen the stakeholders. And then the pandemic comes along. So we were pretty busy. And I'd commissioned an independent board evaluation in January 2020. And why did I commission an independent board evaluation? I knew as the chair we were going to have to make some big decisions. The biggest one in March was going to be what ticket prices. Rugby League is an interesting market for tickets. It typically turns up late and doesn't like paying any price at all. Often that's why you'll see the Challenge Cup final not sold out at Wembley. So we had that all in mind. We needed to generate revenue, but because we targeted eventers and we targeted people we thought had disposable income that would enjoy a rugby league event rather than just a game, be that Newcastle for a weekend, Hull for a weekend, Coventry or Liverpool or Manchester, then we worked out that I wanted the very best board going into the big decisions. So by having an independent board evaluation, I knew then in February and March that I'd be able to make any changes needed before the big decisions were made. So our independent board evaluation was on the 18th and 19th of March 2020. 2 days where I had an independent evaluator that used to be a cabinet secretary to 2 prime ministers, interviewing board members, observing me as well, facilitate a 2-day board, a board dinner, a risk and audit committee, a nominations committee, a remuneration committee, all of the committees that those of you who've worked in sizable businesses know that that's just part of the governance process. So as I say, 18th and 19th of March, and we all know what happened on the 23rd. So as the pandemic started to come through and we started to get locked down, we'd be having calls like this on Zoom, board calls weekly. And these are some of the things that we had never planned to have to discuss, but as a result of the pandemic, completely changed our thinking, our emphasis and our focus. And these are some of the things. Suddenly the question was relevance. Was a sport tournament really relevant when I'm seeing pictures across Europe and across this country of intensive care beds and of people waiting in corridors? When I'm seeing figures of deaths just proliferating throughout this country, we sat there and asked that, you know, is now the time to talk about sport? And I think we said, the phrase we used is, it's a significant, insignificant thing. Sport is part of the fabric of the DNA of this country. People do meet at social events through sport. People do turn up and enjoy the moment of sport, irrespective of what sport that is. But we realised that when people are dying in such numbers, it was insignificant. And therefore, we just were less present in terms of the public eye, but we understood that if a tournament is to continue, then we need to meet as a board, but not make noises about anything, whether that be funding or anything. So we questioned long and hard about relevance, because, as I say, it was an insignificant thing at the time, but we knew that we'd be part of the recovery, not necessarily part of the solution. We wanted to leave that to the scientists and the medics. When we did start to actually have those conversations, we realised that nobody knew how long this pandemic was going to last. And remember, we're talking now in the early days of April, and we started having to have contingency plans that we'd never ever would have had pre-pandemic. So we started to talk about, well, will we play? Will it still be 3 tournaments in one? Will we split one up? And will we do away with the women's or the wheelchair because people might see them as less important? The answer was no. It was either we do all tournaments or we do none. Already we've seen in Rugby Union, they've cancelled the Women's World Cup for next year. That's 2022. That's a big decision to make in 2021. And I'm not sure personally, if that had been the Men's Rugby Union World Cup, whether they'd have cancelled that a year in advance. So again, we were very clear. We stuck to our values about being authentic. We talked about being inclusive as our values. So we said we'll play all the tournaments or not at all. For the first time, we talked about postponing it. So already we realise that the Olympics will be postponed from 2020. We realise that the Euros, which were 2020, were going to move. And when we originally started with the Rugby League World Cup, we were the only global tournament that year. That's why we picked 2021. We knew we'd have a clear run. So instead of having a clear run, now we're at the back end of a year of sport with potentially the Olympics and the Euros. And we sat there thinking we had a clear run, and now we're at the end of it. And if people have spent all the money beforehand, then we might suffer. So we don't want to postpone. If we postpone it to 2022, that goes against not only the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, but also because our tournament is October through November, will really fall into the FIFA World Cup. So BBC, who are broadcasters of the FIFA World Cup, will have a choice to make: show a rugby league game or show England playing a group game of football. Look, you know, I'm chair of the World Cup, but if I was head of the BBC, Barbara Slater, for sport, I'm pretty sure I know which decision I'd make. So the last thing we want to do is move to 2022, because as well as the Commonwealth Games and the FIFA World Cup, we've got the Women's Euros football as well. So it'll be a crowded market in 2022 in the UK, and we don't want to do that. We absolutely didn't know how long it would last, and we started to think about the consequences of cancelling. If you cancel the World Cup, then you know, who knows whether or not you still have an international federation or a tournament left for 2025 or 2029, because the international federation have yet to announce their venue for 2025, but they are talking about either a French bid, a combined Pacific Island bid, a North American bid, potentially a South Africa bid, potentially a Middle East bid, as Middle East tries to capture some of the world sporting market, or a Welsh, Irish and Scottish bid. And then, as we've all now know, that we didn't know what crowds would be allowed in, and to this day I still can't tell you what tickets I can sell up to regarding the tournament at the moment, because the test events are just test events. We don't know the impact of people getting in large numbers together, either football or pop concerts or theatre. And actually, if there's a third or fourth wave, that wave would come just about the time we're ready to kick off. So again, I can't tell you what crowds will have. And as a result of that, I can't tell you what revenue plans I'm definitively working to. We obviously have to consider player welfare. So already we're talking about biosecure bubbles and people coming into a hotel and quarantine. So again, these weren't on our agenda when we were talking about just getting a World Cup up and running. We just wanted it to be digital. We wanted it to be on as many TV screens. We wanted to focus on ticket sales and marketing. And suddenly all of this has changed. Even now, we still are at the behest of border controls for different nations. Well, one of the things I was delighted to see this week was the fact that the Tasman corridor between New Zealand and Australia had been opened up by the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. And we were expecting that to be July. So it's really encouraging that the Australians and New Zealanders will travel between each other, because at the moment, the quarantine rules for Australia and New Zealand, as some of you may well know, is that if you enter either of those countries, you have to quarantine for 14 days. And elite athletes, even World Cup winners potentially, in Australia or New Zealand, would still have to quarantine. And funnily, the players don't want to spend 14 days in a hotel room. So already we're having conversations with the New Zealand and Australian governments about their border control policy and about travel restriction. And it's not just the Australians and the New Zealanders, because we'll have about 70% of all players, male and female, and wheelchair, coming from Southern Hemisphere. The Pacific Islanders of Papua New Guinea, Cook Islands, they'll travel from either Sydney or Auckland. So we are beholden upon those governments. Again, did I ever think we would be having conversations at 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning twice a week, working out how to get elite athletes exemption? The one thing we're looking at quite closely are what happens if the Olympics go ahead and whether or not the Australian and New Zealand governments will give special dispensation to Olympic athletes. Because if they say yes to Olympic athletes, I think it makes our case stronger that the Rugby League World Cup players would be exempt as well, and that just removes another barrier. I have got around 300 different budgets sat on my computer at home. And if I framed them all, I'd need a new house. Literally, we are changing budget day by day. And it's fascinating. In another one of my lives, I am a business mentor. And I've said all along that everybody should keep their SWOT analysis in their back pocket. Because quite frankly, every time Rishi or Boris stands up, you need to redo your SWOT analysis. And we're doing that all the time as a World Cup board. As you can imagine, we had big plans for hospitality. We wanted lots of tables of 10 where people could be on the same table, drinking and eating and just having a thoroughly good time. Well, I'm not sure hospitality lends itself to face masks and sanitizer. So actually, that's a huge income stream of ours that is at risk. Our commercial partners, we lost 3 commercial partners within the first week of lockdown. 2 who'd agreed to sign a contract withdrew their agreement. 1 actually went bust without sending us the cheque. So we were £800,000 down on our commercial deal just in that first week. And as you can imagine, not everybody was rushing to sign commercial deals whilst having to furlough staff, top staff up. The last thing they wanted to do is to be seen by their shareholders or their own staff as giving money to a sporting tournament that in lots of people's eyes was insignificant. Our own teammates that I employ, again, not everybody realises, but everybody who's employed by the Rugby League World Cup 2021 will be made redundant the day after the tournament ends. So when the trophy's presented and the fireworks go, we're all out of a job because it's a pop-up tournament. And that's bad enough in itself, but a lot of people do it because they want the excitement and the experience of being in a global tournament. But the fact is, if we had to postpone or cancel, then people would be made redundant a lot earlier than the 27th of November this year. So again, we've had a significant impact on our colleagues, and that has gone right through everybody, and some real issues about people's resilience and mental well-being, and that's to be understood because the very nature of the pandemic has led people to think about those that they weren't thinking about prior to the impact. I've created a risk oversight committee as well as a risk and audit committee. I've changed my risk and audit chairman following the board evaluation. I've brought a couple of people on that understand big tournaments and risk. So again, I've completely looked at risk. You know, I'm a banker by trade, so I understand risk, and therefore we've had to really think about the different risks now involved as a pandemic. And this one will make you smile. Try getting insurance now for pandemic. Not only try getting insurance for a pandemic, try getting insurance for something you know about is going to happen, you just don't know when. And what do I mean by that? I'm on about getting insurance in the event of a death of a key member of the royal family. Because we've realised that if one of the senior royals was to pass, there would be a number of days in mourning, and that would mean that the games would be postponed. So our worst scenario is we have a semi-final on a Friday men's, followed by a men's semi-final on the Saturday, followed by the final the following Saturday. If a senior royal was to die on the morning of the first semi-final and there was an 8-day mourning period, we would have to postpone our 2 semi-finals and our final. The cost of covering that is 6 figures.
Amazing.
And we've got to find that money out of our budget, where ordinarily we might not have found the extra money. That had just been of our normal insurance risk. Trying to get flights and people to quote flights for athletes from the Southern Hemisphere, it's impossible to do at the moment. And anybody that's even starting to talk to us about flights leaving Australia, the premium on a flight compared to what was in our budget is significant. And if you look back at the regional lockdowns, then we were thinking that we could sell tickets to people in one part of the country for a game in another part of the country and actually be prevented from travelling. And you know, almost with hindsight, the fact that we are only playing in England means we're only dealing with regional lockdowns. If we had games in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, we'd have almost 4 different approaches to travel, and we wouldn't be either allowed in or allowed out of Wales. So travel restrictions, again, we've been mapping everything out about who can travel where and why, and with what restriction. And then our legacy programme, you know, the fact that we couldn't get builders on site to build some of the clubhouses, the fact that some of the clubs that wanted to raise their own money for match funding were not able to do it. We had legacy programmes to take the World Cup experience to Brazil and to Norway. We've already been to Nigeria, Jamaica and Holland. We wanted to go to emerging nations so they could get a real taste of the sport to play in future World Cups. So our planned trip to Cameroon, all of those have been cancelled, and that's impacted us. But how have we approached it? Well, simply, my message to our board was control the controllables. That's a well-known phrase in sport. And I'm saying, look, I can't control the pandemic, but every decision I make, as far as I'm concerned, the tournament's on. We've got players that are coming. Let's control what we can control. And I'll just share a slide with you that I shared with the board the day of lockdown. And it was this one. It's a gloomy moment in the history of our country. Not in the lifetime of most people has there been so much grave and deep apprehension. Never has the future seemed so uncertain. The domestic economic situation is in chaos. Our currency is weak throughout the world, and the political cauldron seethes and bubbles with uncertainty. It is a solemn moment of our troubles. No one can see the end. Some of you might be thinking that's the editorial from the Daily Mail on the 24th of March, 2020, or the Times, or the Telegraph, or the Morning Star. Let me tell you when that editorial was written. It's from the Harper's Weekly Gazette in October 1857. Yeah, it could have been written either when Trump got elected in the States, when the Brexit result was announced, or when the pandemic. And the reason I show that is, if that was the scene and situation 164 years ago, isn't it amazing we're all still here?
Absolutely.
Since then, we've had 2 world wars, we've had the Great Depression, we've had the Winter of Discontent, we've had 9/11, we've had the dot-com bust, we've had the banking crisis of 2008, and you know what, we're still here. So I said, we will get through this. So let's have a belief system that says, let's believe that our scientists will find a cure. And as we know, they haven't found a cure, but they found a vaccine. So where are we now? Well, actually, despite the fact that in the early days, commercial partners walked away, Kazoo believe that the World Cup and its inclusive nature is absolutely perfect fit for their brand. Kazoo have signed with us during the pandemic the biggest ever commercial deal in rugby league history. It's over 7 figures, and they are our headline partner. You can see some of the other names of our official partners and sponsors: Deloitte's, Eversheds, Kappa, Kuehne + Nagel from an operations point of view and logistics, and Manchester Metropolitan University. That's a real step up from traditional rugby league partners that often are betting partners or Northern Rail or Mushy Peas, which again, I'm delightful for them supporting the game, but from a World Cup perspective, we said we wanted to be bold and brave. And you can see there are social impact partners of Movember, UNICEF and Community Integrated Care. These are some of the biggest charities globally that want to partner with the Rugby League World Cup 2021. Let's go back. Sorry. This is the good news about tickets. We had a first ever ticket ballot, and we were expecting to sell a number of tickets during the pandemic. We sold 5 times as many tickets during the pandemic as we planned. That was a pent-up demand for people to come and see something live. but also remember it's a northern tournament for a northern sport. And you can see there that London topped the ballot demand. So we aimed for people who wanted to come to enjoy northern hospitality in northern cities for a great event, as well as watch a rugby league game. And we're proud of our marketing efforts during the pandemic. People, as you can see there, are purchasing 6 tickets on average, with 50% of applications being for more than one game. We were smart, we bundled tickets. So if you wanted to buy a final ticket, you can buy other tickets. We've donated 20,021 tickets to key workers free of charge to come and take part in our tournament. You can see there that 70% of the applicants so far have never been on a rugby league database. So again, the rugby league family we know come late. So that's why we've got an open sale now to really, really build momentum about lockdown happening. So you can see we're in a good place. We've created a team of ambassadors. Some of those people will be familiar to you, some won't yet. And I say yet because some of these people will be all over the BBC. Kevin Sinfield not only is a rugby league legend, he's just run 7 marathons in 7 days for his best friend Rob Burrow, who is suffering from motor neurone disease. 7 marathons in 7 days. I couldn't eat 7 marathon bars in 7 days, never mind do that tremendous feat. Adam Hills, some of you may well know Adam Hills as a comedian. And I said I'd mention the 4th tournament. Adam Hills came to us. Adam's got a physical disability. He loves playing rugby league. You'll see there also we've got Oliver Thomason. Oliver is a rugby league player. He's the guy with the bobble hat on. Oliver's got a physical disability. And they came to us and said, will you run a physical disability World Cup? And we said yes. During the pandemic, with everything else that's going on, we chose to accept the challenge of a 4th tournament because people with physical disability wanted to play their own tournament. They can't manoeuvre a wheelchair, but they can move themselves around a rugby field. And there's some real legends in there of the game already, like Robbie Hunter-Paul. You'll see Jodie Cunningham, who's an ambassador, who's a current England player. And for me, the man in the wheelchair just needs a mention. His name's James Simpson. James lost his legs in an Afghanistan explosion. James has gone on video as saying that wheelchair rugby league saved his life because it gave him something to go towards and motivate. And he's so proud to captain the England Rugby League wheelchair team. So out of all of the adversity, whether that's James's personal story or the pandemic, the Rugby League World Cup 2021 has come out stronger. Those are some of the previous stakeholders that I shared with you that we had to manage. I've had to deal with some new ones over the last 12 months. For the first time ever, I've started to deal directly with government. So dealing with the departure of culture, media and sport. And I have to say that the Minister, Oliver Dowden, has been outstanding. He has supported the tournament every way, which way he possibly could. This tournament was part of the Conservative Party manifesto for the 2019 election. So it's a government pledge. And I have to say, they've stuck by that pledge. And Oliver Dowden, the Monday just gone, was at Warrington, personally, with a Rugby League World Cup coat on, talking passionately about the Rugby League World Cup 2021 and how he personally was looking forward to it. And the fact was our legacy programme in Warrington was showcased. I've had to deal with Treasury for the first time. And it's been really interesting trying to get some space for Treasury when they've been trying to deal with billions of pounds of the furlough. Trying to find the right time and the right approach, again, has been a learning for me. I said earlier, sport is insignificant during a time where we're getting thousands of deaths. But again, Treasury realised that we're part of the solution coming out of lockdown in terms of giving people a sense of spirit and a sense of something to look forward to. I've had to deal with Ticketmaster. Because they thought that the crowds might not come, Ticketmaster have been withholding some of the money because they had to protect their risk, and I understand that. So anybody who's tried to open an escrow account lately through a bank, that's been an interesting experience as well, one that we'd never planned for pre-pandemic. I've had to really deal with airlines, even talking about chartering private planes to get Australians, New Zealand and the Pacific Island over. The cost is ridiculous at the moment, and I can't get any sense out of the commercial airlines in terms of the volumes or the certainty. So we're still having ongoing negotiations. I mentioned earlier the insurers. Insurance costs for global sporting events are not only through the roof, not everybody's prepared to insure a whole tournament. So again, that means we've got to think more about the risk. Dealing with new commercial partners, delighted to say that following the Kazoo deal, we've got more commercial partners wanting to talk to us, again, because of the way we've conducted ourselves as a tournament over the last 12 months. I've had more press to deal with than ever before, and the basic question is the tournament on? Is the tournament off? Will it be behind closed doors? Will it be 50% full or 100% full? And the answer is, I just don't know. We've had to launch our merchandising range. So we've got some Cool Nation stuff now, as well as the stuff I'm modelling tonight. And once again, heading into the final 6 months, I've brought back the independent board evaluator to check that the people that are brought onto the board are the best possible people to take us right through to the end of the tournament. And that evaluation is taking place as we speak. So I've been a bit busy, but I don't mind. It's something that's dear to my heart. It's special, and it's not every chance somebody gets to chair a global sports tournament. And it's even more rare to get to chair a global sports tournament in a pandemic. I've learned lots about myself, but more importantly, I've learned lots about my team. So we're in a really good place. It's been a roller coaster. There's still more bumps in the road. I'm not naive, but I would pay credit to these people here. These are some of the members of the Rugby League World Cup 2021 team. John Dunn, Chief Executive, Stephen Brown, Chief Operating Officer, right through to other people there with Zeb on volunteering, Terry on ticketing, Deepesh on our Created by Legacy Fund. And the bottom two is, the middle one is Stacey Knight. Stacey works for a company called CSM. She was responsible for getting the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees to play a game of baseball at the London Stadium, which were two sellout nights, and nobody understands the rules of baseball, I can assure you. And then the last one is Lord Jonathan Kane. When we did our independent board evaluation, I thought it might be a smart move to have somebody from the House of Lords join the board of the Rugby League World Cup. Jonathan Kane has spent last 10 years being a special advisor to governments of all persuasions on the subject of Northern Ireland. So I thought if he can do that successfully, he can certainly help me navigate government in this country to ensure that we get the very best government support for the Rugby League World Cup 2021. So I'd say thanks and good luck. But as you can imagine, being in sport, I don't believe in luck. So I'll share with you a final quote, and it's a quote from a Roman Seneca, who said that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity to run and be chair of the Rugby League World Cup. For whatever reason, if it doesn't happen, I can assure you it won't be down to lack of preparation, as hopefully I've demonstrated this evening. So again, I'll come off the slide deck. We'll have an open question and answer session and just carry on with a great evening. So thanks for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Brilliant. Fantastic.
So I'll just read, look at some of the questions that are in there. Many of the best rugby union players are ex-rugby league players, mainly from Wigan, it must be said. Yeah, Don, you know, it's a blessing and a curse that because when Martin O'Fire, Sean Edwards would walk down the high street, people would mob them. I reckon if I walked 4 or 5 of the best rugby league players in the world down the high street now, people wouldn't recognise them. And I think what we've got to do is really, really raise the profile of rugby league players because They are athletic. They're certainly accessible. You know, they walk from the car park and sign autographs. Yeah, I mean, that was a special era for rugby league, and we've got to recreate that. And yeah, I think, you know, the tide has turned. Rugby league was the professional sport. We attracted the likes of Jonathan Davis, Martin Afire from Rosslyn Park. But now it goes the other way. Rugby union is more professional. It earns more money in terms of commerciality, and therefore it tends to take some of the very best players. You know, sort of Sale have got, you know, a couple of ex-rugby league players that are doing very well in rugby union. So I think it's a really good point you make, Don. Thank you, Peter, about the significant, insignificant thing. Sport is only 150 years old. It shouldn't have, it shouldn't believe it's entitled to anything. I think it should earn it like the rest of it. You know, I look at the House of Fraser. They were 150 years old and disappeared because they weren't relevant. I looked at Woolworths. You know, I used to get my pick and mix, my first LP, my Ladybird clothes for my kids. I got everything from Woolworths. But quite frankly, the minute you stop being relevant, consumers will decide your future. And I think sport has to wake up to that and start being deeper thinking about the commercial and the consumer proposition. John's asked about the decision making to play or not to play. Please compare that with the decision at the British Lions. In my opinion, John, the British Lions have such a broadcast deal that if they don't play, they would be liable for that. And as a result of that, I think the British Lions would have a problem financially. That would be my take. The reason I say that is when you looked at the Premier League and some of the other sports with broadcast deals, they weren't providing any content for Sky or BT Sport for 2 months. And if you look at Sky Sport stopped taking any Sky Sport subscriptions. I suspect that cost Sky millions of pounds. And I do know that they were in negotiation with national governing bodies about a rebate. So if you don't take my money and then don't deliver me the content, actually you're not fulfilling your obligations. So I think the Lions have probably tried to look at every possible which way to get the tournament played. There was rumours, and I'm not party to them, but there were rumours that they were going to be played in this country, the tests. If for whatever reason that has not been agreed contractually, then that's why they're going over to South Africa to play behind closed doors. But I think the broadcast deal would be significantly higher than the one I'd be looking at. And therefore, I have to play, or I'm not as exposed if we had to either postpone or cancel.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
Yeah, it's Peter McBride.
Hi, Peter.
I'm a soft southerner in your terms, but I'm not a rugby league fan. But I think, as I've put a couple of times, I think this event is a real opportunity to raise awareness and as basic as explain the rules of rugby league as opposed to rugby union. But I think. I'm really impressed by your passion, your enthusiasm, and if you could bottle it, then you'd become a millionaire. How do you think we can make the most of this event? And I think what you're doing is fantastic. And even I'm getting on the ticket website to buy tickets. I think there's a real opportunity, and you must see this, to sell rugby league across the UK, not just as a northern sport, but it's across the UK. And I think you're doing a brilliant job. And I think what's the legacy of this? I mean, the fact you're having 3 events at one is brilliant. And I think it's brilliant. And I would encourage everybody to really sign up and buy into this situation.
Oh, Pete, I just everybody just to go to one match, whether it's a men's, a women's, or a wheelchair. And if a lot of people look, Southerners are not softies, right? I don't do this partisan bit, right? You know, I'm a Man United fan, but I can still handle Liverpool winning the league, the Premier League. I'm from Lancashire, but a lot of my mates are from Yorkshire, and I'm happy when Leeds Rhinos do well or Huddersfield Giants. and I'm certainly not the anybody north of Watford's hard, anybody south of Watford's soft. I don't do that. Look, I'm a citizen of the UK, and that's why I concur with everything you're saying, Peter. I think it's an opportunity for people who've never experienced rugby league to see that it's a simpler game than rugby union. Sometimes when you try and explain, look, I'm a rugby union fan, trying to explain ruck and maul, off your feet, coming in from the side, it can get a bit complex. Whereas rugby league, we don't have contested scrums. So if we start really taking sport wider, you'll see it in football at the moment, you'll see it in rugby union, you'll see it in rugby league. Concussion injuries, head injuries, the long-lasting damage that has. Genuinely, sport has to take a look at itself. Seeing the late Peter Lorimer die recently, Chris Sutton's dad, Mike, Bobby Charlton isn't very well at the moment. So rugby league is a simpler game. We have 6 goals at running at you. You have 6 goals at running at us. We have uncontested scrums and we don't have lineouts. And again, it's not criticising the game of rugby union, but if I was a rugby union coach and my team was winning with 2 minutes to go, I'd make sure the referee reset the scrums 3 or 4 times. That would wind the clock down. Whereas again, in rugby league, we have what's called a shot clock, so you cannot waste time. The clock automatically stops. And again, I think the ball's in play more in rugby league. There's good athleticism, there's good ball handling skills. We get a bit of tasty fisticuffs at times. And I think there's a lot of that people would go, this is an exciting game. The results are often less than 4 points apart at elite level, same as rugby union. So you get some real good contests. So it's a great opportunity. I'm really pleased that the BB Shields show all 61. And again, without giving too much away, my understanding is the BBC have agreed to show 24 games now on their terrestrial channels that might include BBC 4. But actually, if I've got a lot of women's games or a lot of wheelchair games on BBC, and again, just waiting for confirmation, but I believe that BBC will also show the wheelchair final live on the Friday night before the double header final. So the final at Old Trafford we start with the women's final followed by the men's final. And again, I think having terrestrial TV coverage gets you the right exposure. And it's one of the big dilemmas that sport has. Do I take the greater pounds check off a satellite subscriber, knowing that there's less people watching my game, or do I have less money and have it on terrestrial TV and have more people watch the game? It's one of the big dilemmas that sport is always wrestling with. And the ideal one, and I think cricket managed to do this well, where you can have a bit of both. So you can see, some parts of the games on satellite, but some games on terrestrial. I think we did that with the Nations Cup as well. So I think this, I could talk for hours on broadcast deals. Talk about clips rights and versus. I think we're all of a generation where we could watch a match in full. I've got a 28-year-old son. He can't sit still for 80 minutes to watch sport.
Absolutely, yeah.
But Sky give him a clips right that enable him to watch all the exciting action 5 minutes after the game's finished.
No, absolutely right. And I'll allow you to read other questions and other people to come in. But I personally, and I'm sure a lot of other people on this call, watched the Bayern Munich Paris Saint-Germain football match last night, which was allegedly marketed as the biggest and the most expensive and the most creative. I saw players be touched on the cheek and roll over 2 or 3 times. I think this is a real opportunity, and I speak as a non-rugby league follower. I think it's a real opportunity for rugby league to take a real foothold and I know the audience here. We are real men. We've been brought up. We've been brought up to look after ourselves and everything. I think it's a real opportunity for rugby league to take a bigger foothold in the UK sport. And well done, Chris. Brilliant tonight. Really enjoyed you. And long may you continue and develop this sport. It's a fantastic sport. And I speak as a non-rugby league fan.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it, Peter. I'll just go through some of the questions. John Allen's, why is rugby union so much more popular than rugby league? I have my views. I'd love to hear your views before I goodbye, John. So if we unmute you, John, you could come in. I'd love to know what your views are. John's still on. John Allen?
Can I ask a question?
You may be waiting for my views. I've actually just typed something in because I actually feel that although I'm a rugby union supporter and always have been and played rugby union, that it would be far safer for youngsters to play, to be taught rugby league at school, because there's far less injuries, and that's where the problem starts. And if you got him by that route, that would be the way to get in rugby league into many areas.
Yeah, there is the distinct possibility that rugby league and rugby union becomes the same sport in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that the way it's going. Too many injuries. Something's got to be done about it.
Well, certainly touch rugby, it had a huge effect at school. When you don't have the contact. And that's
touch and tag are variants of the game at both codes. We've got veterans as well, where you have different coloured shorts to dictate your age. So a 30, 40-year-old can't take a 75-year-old out with a complete sort of coat hanger. So there's different variants of the game, and again, male team sports are on the decline. People got more things to do with their life.
Can I just say that I think most people of my age would remember Eddie Waring and rugby and the league always on the telly every Saturday, all getting totally covered in mud. I would just add that I actually paid for my season ticket at the London Stadium yesterday.
Right.
But we've only had American football there.
Yeah, well, you West Ham are doing all right. They should qualify for the Champions League.
Oh, that's a foregone conclusion.
Can I just answer Peter's question? Because Peter Robson's asked a really good question. Why is the tournament in November? Again, Peter, just the complexity of global rugby league. Rugby league made the decision 20 years ago to stop being a winter sport, to start being a summer sport. For the reason that was said about playing in mud. So it became a summer game because there's less competition, Peter, in the summer game. So the way the international calendar is now, the Australian season and the English season doesn't finish till the first week in October. So and there's no way of moving the season around without impacting on other seasons. I think the Premier League are going to find this out because the World Cup's been moved to winter. So historically, the World Cup always comes after the end of the domestic season in England and New Zealand, and the grand final is typically the first weekend of October. Give the players a couple of weeks to travel, acclimatise, and then kick off. So it was always going to be a winter tournament.
Could you have got Strictly Come Dancing to change their dates instead then?
You'll never get BBC to change Strictly Come Dancing. I reckon if England gets to the World Cup final and that clashes with Strictly, there's going to be an interesting debate at the BBC. It's all about viewing figures. The reality is Strictly get more viewing figures than a sporting game on terrestrial, unless it's the absolute top. And often numbers dictate, Peter, what the schedule looks like. So those are some of the conversations we've been having about kick-off times, and they're fascinating.
Thanks for the answer.
Oh, thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. Brian McNeil. Brian, you've asked, how many people do you have in helping to organise this event, and are they paid? Got a really small staff of people who are working, and yet they're paid. But as I said earlier, they're paid until the 28th of November. And then with the exception of 2 or 3 people that will finalise the accounts and close the company down, the rest are out of a job. So we rely upon volunteers, particularly around the tournament. So we've gone out with a volunteer programme trying to get 2021 volunteers, and we're hoping that they'll enjoy being part of the Rugby League World Cup Festival, just as people at 2012 did. And, you know, people are really proud to work at 2012, wear the T-shirt with the mascot with pride, and many of them still have that T-shirt today. So we always rely in sport upon volunteers, not just the World Cup. Grassroots sport wouldn't exist without volunteers. Many people on this call, I'm sure, volunteers are either club secretary or membership. Even the 41 club. I can't imagine you guys are flown to Barbados every week as part of your remuneration package. So sport and charitable organisations relies upon volunteers. So we've got a very small staff because we didn't want heavy staff cost that ultimately that goes away from investing in the rest of the game. So hopefully that answers your question, Brian.
Yeah, it does indeed. I was a volunteer in the 2012 Olympics, and I can commend that to anybody that's thinking of volunteering. It's absolutely a wonderful experience.
Honestly, it's a lovely, you know, it's just a lovely thing to be able to work with happy people. You know, everybody in 2012 was happy. You know, people, you know, going to the London Stadium for the first time, you know, volunteers going, well, if you do this and you turn left or you go there, and it was just lovely. You know, for me, it was like being in Disneyland. Everyone's happy.
Yeah,
so
brilliant.
volunteering is very, very rewarding. Again, thank you. I encourage you as well.
Chris, thanks very much. We will go on with a few questions afterwards, but there's a few dropping off now. So before we get too many dropping off, I'd like to personally thank you myself. It's been absolutely fantastic. You're a very passionate speaker, great to listen to. But I'd like to hand over to Win, who is going to give you a vote of thanks on behalf of us all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Win.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Hi, Chris. Well, as a Welsh rugby union man, rugby league is my second love. But as a Saints fan, living in Bradford, surrounded by Bradford Bull supporters, you can imagine what this household used to be like a few years ago. And our friend from down south, the Southern Softies, taken away a lot of my words for what I was going to say, but I'll repeat them anyway. I think the ethos that you've adopted for the tournament of inclusivity and diversity is fantastic. I think we all hope that you can leave the sport and the country with a lasting legacy from what you're doing. As a volunteer and a supporter, obviously, I hope that the tournament goes ahead, and I hope it is a glorious success that all your hard work deserves. I'd like to thank you most sincerely on behalf of us all for a very entertaining and informative presentation. To me, it's been an eye-opener to see all of the obstacles and problems you've had to overcome to organise an event like this in these trying and difficult times. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. And gentlemen, if we could all show our appreciation in the usual way.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Win. Very kind. Thank you.